Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a Cloudy Sheep, and we are playing Command, Modern Naval and Air Operations. Last two episodes we talked a bit about the disposition of our fleets and aircraft, and now we want to really get into the game. So far we will talk a bit about the strategy, but not too much because it's relatively straightforward. Again, just to recap, our objective is to send this group Delta over here, which has a couple of landing craft and landing craft tanks, along with a couple of frigates, down here towards the Canary Islands. It does already have a plotted course for that, to send us to this landing zone over here, which is pretty close actually to the airport of Tenerife over here, and yeah, so that will be a bit of a challenge. We do have the group Alpha over here, which is traveling in front of that, just to engage anything that comes along the way. We do have these submarines down here, which I think will be very useful, but we'll restructure their courses a bit over here. So this guy, I think we will be sending towards El Granado airport over here. Also, by the way, something that I really like to do is instead of this sort of photographic thing over here, I really want to have the relief layer over here, and that will change once we click on anything. But this is sort of more intuitive way to structure terrain as soon as it loads. Yeah, there we go. So you can sort of more easily see the height disadvantages and advantages of this area up here, and that I believe will be very helpful later on. Takes a moment to load, but we can basically see that Las Palmas over here is basically a big ass mountain with an elevation of nearly 5,000 feet in the center, and then we have these units up here. So I basically want to have a look at what's going on at this airport, and at least understand when stuff is starting or landing. So we'll plot a course down here. Shortcut for that is F3. We'll also bring up with F2 this thing over here, and I really want to be at periscope depth, so that we can see basically extend a bit of a periscope and see what's going on. We'll also send it to, right now it's at a speed of full, so 10 knots over here, or it was at 10 knots basically, but I think I will want to have it at a creep speed over here, so we don't give away too much our position. Will take a while to get down here, but I don't really have an issue with that. I just basically want to see what's going on. We can also have a look at here whether the sensor actually tells us that it's only active on acoustic. This is a tracked sort of thing. Sonar. So these are only available at periscope steps, even though nothing here is telling you that directly. That's fine. This guy basically goes down there, and this guy I want to have a bit closer to the other airport over here as well. Again, on a periscope depth, creep speed is fine. Here again, this submarine is definitively looking at this contact over here, even though it might just be an artifact. And up here, which I think is a bit less modern submarine, although I don't actually know that. 1980s, 60s technology. Yeah, it's not quite as modern, so I think we will leave it on this course. Just over the layer, creep speed, cruise speed maybe, just so it can cover some ground and give some information of what's going on here. These airports certainly won't help. This radar is turned on, so that's great as well, and now we'll have to think about these guys. One of the biggest decisions that we will have to do is whether we run to one active or passive, and I think this group Delta here, I basically let's briefly look at the disposition here. Group Alpha is in front, running at 19 knots, where this guy is at 11 knots, but increasing speed to 19. So I think that's fine. I think I want to bring them a bit closer together. So we'll have this guy go somewhat more slowly, but in principle I want this unit to be a bit more visible maybe than this one. So this one definitively, it does have a couple of frigates, so it's not entirely defenseless. And we may look at the structure over here. You can see that a lot of these units are cavitating, which really isn't great, but can we actually see that? Yep, so it's cavitating at a speed of more than 8 knots, which basically means it's very audible. It's very loud. There's sort of air bubbles created by the propellers, and that's not very nice, because it means that if there's anyone anywhere sort of even closely around, that will be a bit of a problem. We can also see that the pattern over here, I believe, is somewhat fine. These should be the landing ships, so they are sort of in the center of the formation, and there are other units trailing towards that direction, and more importantly, a good number of units in the sort of more relevant threat axis. So probably if an attack was going to come, it probably would come from here, and that probably we could fight off, or at least hope to fight off with these frigates. It is cavitating, so it's rather likely that it is going to be spotted, but for now I believe we will... What's about these boats actually? I think that's all just the landing craft. So nothing to worry about there. They all have good fuel, so there will be no issues. There's a bunch of weapons in here. A lot of harpoons, which are, as we talked about, very important anti-shipping missiles. A couple of rims, so these are anti-missile... Where is it? Valid targets. Helicopter. So anti-missile missiles, basically, with a decent speed, but very limited. It's actually kind of okay range, though the hit probability isn't that great actually. But nevertheless, it has a seeker weapon, so maybe these will be useful, but probably not too much. You can also see that the range, sort of engagement ranges here. The anti-air range is sort of decent. That's the red thing over there. The surface weapons, that's probably our Harpoon missiles. The air range is okay-ish, but the land weapons, so basically our guns, that's very close range weaponry there. So there's not too much to do with this thing, other than just basically sail down there on this course that's already plotted. These guys are also just going to move towards that direction, and we'll see if we can spot anything. Other than that, I think we will start with a relatively simple mission over here, and that is we will try to get air superiority. In the short term, we'll develop our strategy a bit more detailed later on, once we know a bit more about the enemy. I don't want to launch every single aircraft that I have right now, even though, of course, initially there might be a bit more to fight on about. But let's look at the aircraft down here. Again, there are a couple of Hornets, some of which are unavailable, some of which already have an anti-shipping profile. I'm tempted to change that to an anti-air profile, because we basically want to degrade their ability to fight the air war as soon as possible. And I'm actually not sure I would fly an anti-shipping profile with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sort of things, and I'm a bit reluctant about this loadout over here, but I think for now it's fine. Let's pick up some aircraft from both of these airports over here. Some Hornets. There are 15 here right now. I think a flight of how many aircraft do we want to take up? I think one strong flight from over here with maybe 4 units would be good. So we'll launch these guys as a group, and you can see that instead of park, they are now taxiing to takeoff, and they'll probably be in the air in about 2 minutes, although they would start one after the other, so it will take a bit of time for these to form up. Moron over here. Yeah, it's actually got Moron. You will have a flight of just 2 maybe launching, even though they're called light, but they have more sidewinders. Again, I'm not entirely sure that this is a very good profile, but if we were to rearm these guys, it would take a couple of hours to actually do that. And right now I don't know what's in the air, so we'll launch these guys as well. Did I actually do that? I don't think I did. Launches group, yeah, you're taxiing to takeoff, very nice. For the tankers, we don't really need that right now because we don't have anything in the air that's that would require fuel. Of course, you'll need to think about that a bit beforehand, but that's fine. The Harriers here, I don't want to use them right now. They're a bit more of an emergency situation thing. Again, tankers not required right now. I think it would make sense to launch at least one of our Rion craft over here. Maybe. No, let's not do that right now. Let's set up a proper mission for them later on. Here again, tankers no. The offensive ECM, I don't think that would be a good idea right now. Or maybe. It has a pretty good air search pattern over there, but I think since we only have one of these units, I really want to keep it more dedicated to a proper mission that we might do later on. These guys, on the other hand, with pretty strong air search stuff over here, we launch that right away. Of course, as an individual flight, so that's fine. This we set up basically here. Our initial launches are set up. Our strong radar suit over here is illuminating everything. Although it's worthwhile to point out that this is basically situated on a mountain, I believe, which of course does make sense. Come on, load the terrain. Load the terrain. Load the terrain. Yeah, you can see it's pretty much high up there on the single peak at an elevation of about 5,000 feet, which is higher than all of these mountains, which is just as good, because otherwise they would sort of block the radar pattern. But it does mean that everything flying below that altitude is probably very hard to spot. And in particular, can you see here is a mountain range of sort of similar heights. So everything going on here at sort of plain down here will probably not be spotted by this guy, even though it pretends it can see all this range. Here at Group Alpha, I'm not sure whether we'll want to run active yet, so right now we're not doing that. However, we will also need to set up a couple of more patterns. We'll look at the unit view over here. Actually, I think I prefer the group view, and then the map settings show ghosted member for all groups. So yeah, it's similar but not quite the same. Basically, you can click on the group and it will always give you the group information. So the first thing that we might want to do with these guys down here, Group Alpha, is we know that there's not a submarine threat, right? We were in our briefing here. Where is it? Briefing, side briefing. We know that there are several naval submarines and that they are somewhere off the coast of Morocco. So submarines would be very dangerous. We can spot them with passive sonar if they are traveling in that region, if they are kind of obvious about that. But of course we don't know that right now, so we'll want to probably use some of our aircraft here. Not the Harriers, but some of our helicopters do have an anti-submarine capability and dipping sonar, so we'll set up our first mission over here. So we'll add reference points with Control Insert, or rather define an area, which we can do just like that. So we have 4 reference points that are now active. And we could define a search pattern over here, and we are moving in sort of this direction, so that's maybe not the most useful. Let's maybe do it as sort of a cone shape thing, a couple of miles out from our actual group, and maybe sort of like whoop. No, I want to select you. I want to move you down here. So this is just reference points and numbering. But you can sort of imagine that this forms an area, and since submarines tend to be somewhat slow, or really need to drive at a high speed, which opens them up for detection, this is it should be a very good pattern. Let's push it out a bit more. So if there's a unit very close to us where it could engage them, it will be detected here, and here we have sort of more of units moving in from the threat axis, so just widening this sort of pattern. We will mark this as well, and then make these reference points as relative to these guys, and we will have it on a rotating bearing. So that means basically that did it do that? I think it should. Rotating bearing to these guys. Right. So these are now rotating in respect to alpha. So if alpha was group alpha was to turn around and say move to this direction, then all of these points would rotate along with that area. So that will be very helpful. And we will define a mission. So add a new mission up here. It will be a patrol pattern and an anti-submarine warfare patrol. A patrol rather. And we'll call that mission alpha anti-submarine warfare pattern. Activation time, we don't need to play around with that. We basically want to start it right away, and that's fine. And now we get into the grid grind of it. You can see that how it defined the pattern over here, and it's sort of shading that area that we want. So that's fine. It's defined by these 4 rotating reference points over here, 26, 27, 28, 9. That's fine. That's perfectly what we want. Then we have the name of this mission over here. Again, here's sort of the parameters that we've seen already. We want to, this is where you can basically define the parameters of the mission a bit more. This is a 1/3 rule, so that basically tells us whether we want to have. This is a good thing for continuing missions. So that tells you that about 1/3 of the aircraft that you assign to these missions are on station. About 1/3 are expected to be in transit, and 1/3 are rearming, refueling, repairing, and that sort of thing. So that's very good if you want to have a very long, sustainable mission that's going on through probably our entire scenario here. And that's perfectly what we want here, right? We want to have some units on the station all of the time, and just basically look for submarines. Units will be fine to investigate contacts outside of this area. So if a unit is here and spots a submarine that would be here, then definitively fly there and look at that. Also investigate contacts within the weapons range. So that's basically the same, hopefully. This checkbox tells you whether when we use MCON, so the electronic emissions control, if we were to have radar, for example, up and active, whether we want that to be in this area only, or whether we will also want to do that on transit. So, for example, if there was an aircraft that actively uses radar in this area, would we want to have it on the way that active as well or not? And I think it doesn't matter for us because this is so close basically. Flights size can be a couple of aircraft, but I think single aircraft is fine because there's no point in having two helicopters right next to each other. Tankers here, they'll probably not be relevant, so we'll not allow that for now. That's fine. This is irrelevant because aircraft numbers below flight size, we are only using a flight size of 1, so that's fine. We'll not assign any ships to this mission. Basically, our ships will stay in formation. This will only be an aircraft mission, so that's fine. These things we don't particularly care about. This is basically how we want to get there. By cruise speed, yes, that's fine. Remain there, yes. Loiter speed, that's fine. And attack throttle, just use anything that helps. Ships and submarines, again, we won't even assign to this mission. That looks pretty good. Prosecution area is irrelevant here as well. Patrol area is just basically look in this area. If you find anything in there, or while you're looking in there find anything outside of there, just please look at that more closely. That's, I think, very, very good. We also have to look at the mission. MCON over here, so this is the emission control and rules of engagement. Several of these things we can influence, some of them not. We can, for example, not use nuclear weapons, also because we don't have anything. Rules of engagement, that's fine. Basically fire only at anything that we actively positively identified as hostile, except for subsurface. There we might attack anything that is not identified as friendly. Yes, that's fine. I do like this sort of setting, but what we really want here is MCON settings, and we in particular want active sonar units. So this basically tells these guys that it's fine to use active sonars, active sonar in the mission area, and I like that. I want that. I definitely want that. Radar, radar maybe not. Yeah, that looks good. So basically, weapons release oriented. That's we don't really need to deal with these things, but this is important. So they actually use the dipping sonars and deploy their active things. That's good, I believe. Now we need to assign actual units to this, and I'm a bit worried because here you can see all of the units that you could potentially assign to this mission. Let's see if we can identify. These are just ships in Group Alpha, which is a bit unfortunate because I would want to use a couple of units that are most relevant to that, but I don't particularly know which one that would be. I think these guys definitely, because you can see here it's a Mark 46 torpedo, and they are on the R11 ship, which we know is the carrier sort of ship over here, which is actually in Group Alpha. So these guys definitely can move into this mission. The Harriers won't be useful. The Colibris are electronic warfare units. These guys are anti-submarine warfare, but it's on L51. That is a landing craft, so it was actually in the other group over to the northeast. So that's not relevant. These guys, early warning, airborne early warning. Nope, not really relevant for us. Harriers, no. Seahawks. These guys, yes. Oh dear, this is going to be complicated. So this guy, because it's on F101, which is in our group. 2, no. 3, we don't have these in our group. 86, we don't have that. 105, yes. 85, yes. 84, not. So these two we can add to the mission because we wouldn't want to use aircraft from the other group over here, right? because that would just mean that in America we can also use, because that would mean they basically try to fly from the other group over all the way to the front of this group, and that's not really what we that's not really what we want. Seahawks, I think that's all that are in this group. 86, no. 84, no. These must be in the group Delta. I wish there was an easier way to tell. Offensive OCM, Boeing, no. Hornets, no. Orions, no. Orions we could use. These are basically the fixed-wing aircraft that were at the on land, basically, but they'll probably get independent missions at some point. Yeah, and that looks pretty much okay to me. There's not much more units, so we have 6 helicopters here. We have the 1/3 rule, so we can expect that 2 of these aircraft will always be on station there. And I think that's very fine. That's perfectly fine. We do have a good pattern over here. I like that. We'll also need to set up something similar over here. So again, mark this group, define an area. Define area. It's always very helpful because it just simply gives you 4 points, and we can do something similar, so sort of spreading out. That's fine, I believe. Do we have these guys selected down there? No, we don't, so we can just add a new mission, and that's again a patrol pattern rather, on an anti-submarine warfare mission, and we know that this is anti-submarine warfare, Delta patrol, fine, and here very similarly we will tell these guys that everything here is fine, and this is a very good search pattern. We can again specify that we want to have active sonar, which is really helpful, even though it tends to give away your position a bit. But for aircraft it's not that important, right? Because aircraft you could have a lot of things. And I don't really want to use you to use tankers, that's fine as well. And then we'll need to define a couple of guys. Again, electronic warfare, no. Anti-submarine warfare, yes. L-51, yes, we can use that one for this mission. Early airborne warning, so that's a no. Again, here this red one is probably undergoing maintenance, so that would not be particularly useful. These 4 guys are on these 2, this, and this ship, so these 4 guys we can all use. That's perfectly fine. And then these are just fixed aircraft, right? So not much use there. Okay, looks good. We can just close that. But we will also just, with these guys, again need to tell them that this is... Actually, I think I want this to be a bit more generous towards this side. And we'll need to tell you that these reference points are actually in relation to group D, and please rotate them. So when you get down there, it will rotate somewhat to this direction as well. That's fine. So that's a very good setup. We will start to run the... I actually think it's maybe a bit less cluttery to not show the units for these 2 groups. Perfectly fine. I believe we will let it run for just a couple of seconds and maybe minutes to start our aircraft and see what's going on, and then probably have to call it a day again. So, game is running now. You can see that these guys are starting to dive or change directions. This guy here, you can see it's currently moving in that direction, but we told it to please go investigate this contact, or at least go closer to there. So it's moving there. It should also I believe sink down a bit. So we are just above the layer over here, and pause. So we have a couple of new contacts, skunk contacts. You can see here in the mission area, skunk contacts. That's basically always subs. So over here, oh, that's very interesting. So okay, so No, actually, that's not. Sorry, that's not goblins. Are submarine contacts, right? As we know here, these are actually surface ships. So we know there are some surface ships over here, and we do know that they have this. We detected their emissions, right? So I think this guy basically just got to periscope depth, and has started looking. And this is a passive ability, so you can see none of these sonars or radars are active here. But basically, it means we know that towards these directions, we can see some radar emissions. So it's a China type 352 square tie radar. FCR, not entirely sure what that means, but it's a surface-to-surface radar. And if we look at this contact report, it basically means that this must probably be this type of ship, because this is the only ship that we know that is in the Egyptian Navy, so it's probably one of our enemies. And this is fitted with this type of radar. So here you can see that it's probably this radar over here. And that is actually very, very interesting. So we know a couple of things already. They are running active radar. We've spotted 3 of their units. At least we know that they are around. Let's look at the capabilities of this guy. This we don't particularly care about. This is just sort of anti-aircraft artillery, not very useful. To be perfectly honest, again, 50. That's fine. These might be a bit more interesting. So. They can fire rockets. They can fire these rockets at submarines at a very low range, but basically it's a depth charge. So sort of similar to the British Hedgehog from World War II. Couple of depth charges, yes. Maybe not that threatening at this range, and some anti-ship missiles. So I believe that. Yeah, these 2 launches over here probably refer to these double twin launches over here, which can target surface ships. Has not that great of a speed, slower actually than some of our aircraft, but with a pretty decent range. So this definitely is a threat. Do we know how many? Do we know how many magazines? No, so it's probably just they don't probably have any magazines. They're just probably in there. So in itself, that's probably not that dangerous, because we might be able to shoot these guys down. But they are certainly massive. Just half a ton of explosives up there. They also have helicopters, so we should be aware of that. And I think these are all very similar radar signatures, aren't they? This is a China type. This is a bit different, so let's look at what this could be. Fast-guided missile patrol craft. In a sense, not quite as strong. You can probably see. Oh no. Actually, they are pretty good. So they can fire at 80 nautical miles. Their warhead is not quite as big and not quite as fast, but it does have quite a number of them actually, as you can see here. So it probably has four quad launchers, right? So yeah, so probably 16 missiles in total, and that is much more difficult to counter because they can overwhelm you much more quickly. But also here, no strategic depth to that. And you don't look like you have a helicopter, do you? Nope, you don't. So that's good for us to know, because we are sort of vulnerable against helicopters. And this probably is yeah. So this must be one of these ships again. Very interesting to know. We are sort of in the middle of that. We don't know where they are. We just know that they're somewhere probably within this yellowish area over here. So I think it does make sense for us to go and investigate that and hopefully get a good shot on that as well. Maybe maybe it will be helpful. Also, let's bring this guy up here as well, and you can sort of see that this pattern is changing. It's now been 3 seconds, 4 seconds when we last saw this contact, so it's giving us some information. Of course, for a ship in 10 seconds, it won't drastically move out of this range, but at least it's good to know, and for aircraft, it's somewhat more relevant. We should probably soon start to see some of the helicopters being launched. It's just been 40 seconds in-game time. Let's wait for a couple of seconds here. Something has changed, and I believe that, yeah, we do now have a lot more information about these guys, because we actually we do know that they are hostile, which we certainly sort of guessed before. Got some updates on the bearing there. We now estimate that this guy is probably much further out. These guys are probably much closer, so I think we'll make a change here and we'll investigate this contact. This guy I'm not so concerned about because he has much less anti-submarine warfare capabilities, so that's fine. You, on the other hand, maybe go towards the middle of that, and everything else should be fine. Maybe it's worthwhile to for you to go not from periscope to depths, but just go over the layer, be a bit more deeper, so you can deal with these guys a bit better. Up here, not much happening so far. Planes should be launching soon. It's now been a minute, and we know that they take about 2 minutes from when we give the order to when they actually launch. This guy is going deeper now. That's fine. Slowly turning around. Of course, we lose the information about the positioning here, but I hope that soon we'll pick them up on sonar. Also, we are still running very quietly at a low speed, so that's very nice as well. Right, we can speed up game time a bit over here. Won't help that much, but I think as soon as our flights have launched and we'll set them up, should be good to go. Whoa, this is too loud. So please stop and let me change that. It's a bit of a pity because you can't actually scale that, so we'll just we'll enable it, but between episodes I'll turn down the volume. So a couple of things changed here, and that is we had some launches, a couple of helicopters over here. 3 helicopters actually. I'm not sure why they launched that many, because actually our Delta patrol over here has the 1/3 rule, and we have 5. Well, maybe it's fine. So basically we have 3 guys here on station that will now start to look out on submarine threats down there. That's fine. Other aircraft haven't launched yet. Again, here some helicopters going there. That's fine. Yeah, looking good. And in a couple of seconds, I guess we'll see the aircraft being launched. Also, you can see how these helicopters are gaining height. So this yellow circle there, which is surface sensors, is increasing. So we know a lot more about as they gain height, the sort of the curvature of the Earth and the horizon gets further pushed out. It's now been nearly 2 minutes since we last got information on these guys, but I'm very confident that they'll not outrun us dramatically. I also think I want to push these guys out a bit more. And maybe pull this in a bit, so we can make sure that there's some decent coverage there. We haven't actually seen any enemy aircraft yet, so probably they're not airborne either, but and there we go. Again, apologies for the sound, I'll have to fix that. We have one flight over here, which I think should be 4 Hornets, right? Excellent. And I'll tell you guys just to get about to guys. Please go around here, and you'll auto do that, but cruise speed and probably get to a higher altitude, because that is the most efficient pattern. These two guys I'll also send around about here, and then we have this Boeing over here, which I'll park slightly further back, and you are much slower, of course. Let's pause for a second. And your MCON controls over here. Let's actually look at your sensors. There's a weather navigation radar. I don't think that would be useful, but this passive sort of stuff over here will be. So you don't actually need to run on active emissions. So I think it's maybe worthwhile to pull you a bit in. We also got some classification of Goblin 222, and we do think now that you are a submarine, which doesn't tell us a lot, but so we are getting more confident, at least, that you are actually a submarine and not a whale or anything of that sort. Your depth is unknown, your speed is unknown, your headed bearing is unknown, what type of craft you are is unknown, so for now that's not very useful. These guys over here should start to turn into their desired direction. This Boeing over here is a bit more slow, and these guys here apologies for the sound, it's really stupid that it's so loud. These guys over here are on a good course, I believe. And we'll wait again, boogie. So we have new contacts over here. Boogie, two boogies, so that's aircraft, which we don't know. They're shown here as neutral, yellow, because they're just way too far away. We don't know anything about their emissions or anything. But to be honest, the fact that it just originated from this airfield tells me that this is probably an enemy, so I'll mark it as at least unfriendly, so we know it's probably not very friendly to us. It could, of course, still be a civilian airline or anything, or something like that, but I kind of doubt that this is what's going on here. There should also be another boogie, and it's been, I think, uncovered by this, so let's use a couple of seconds. Boogie 22 and 27, so these guys are probably very close to each other, right? No, where's 27? Oh, there we are. 26. Come on, 27. Yeah, and now we can see that it's moving at 350 knots. So very hard to say. Is this a military speed already? It might not be. 350 knots. Let's look at our own aircraft. Here, these guys are moving somewhat faster, whereas our guy over here is somewhat slower. So I'm guessing really it's military, but in particular since it's two flights, right? Two aircraft right next to each other. So that's very unlikely to be a civilian pattern. Let's look at the context down here. Nothing has really changed. So I think with this the episode has gone on long enough. They'll probably might turn these guys in. The problem is that I don't really know about anything about the air defenses over here, so I'm reluctant to go in blind too much. but maybe we'll have a fight over here on this sort of area. It's just 2 aircraft against 2 aircraft, so I'm a bit reluctant with this, and so I think what we'll do right away here is pick our airfield here and launch 2 more of our Hornets in this configuration, so that we know that we'll have some backup. But that's fine. Episode has gone on long enough, and I can see that we will be probably already fighting in next turn. So I thank you guys for watching, and I see you guys around next time. Bye bye. Pause.